Think medieval queens were all about embroidery and royal banquets. Think again. What if we told you some of history's most powerful women were also secret agents of daring rescues, putting their lives on the line for those they loved in their kingdoms? From the 11th to the 15th centuries, these queens were not just figureheads. They were masterminds of incredible operations that would make modern thrillers blush. Number 7. The Midnight Flight from Stonehold. The year was 1342. Queen Isabella of Gallia paced her solar chamber, the heavy tapestry whispering secrets as she passed. Outside, the winds howled like a hungry wolf, mirroring the storm brewing within her heart. Her father, the venerable King Louis the Wise, a man whose reign had stretched across 5 decades, was being held captive. Not by a rival kingdom, but by a treacherous cousin, Baron Armand, who had usurped control of the remote, isolated fortress of Stonehold. Louis had gone to visit his former hunting lodge unsuspecting, only to be seized in a swift, brutal coup. News had reached Isabella through a network of loyal merchants, hushed whispers carried on the wind, confirming the king's precarious state. He was old, frail, and the high walls of Stonehold, carved from dark, forbidding rock, were a death sentence for a man accustomed to the comforts of the royal palace. Armand's true motive was still shrouded in mystery, but his ambition was clear: to let the old king fade away, then claim the throne for himself. Isabella knew that sending an army was out of the question. Stonehold was built into a sheer cliff face, its single approach guarded by a narrow winding path that could be defended by a handful of archers against a legion. Any open assault would lead to her father's immediate demise. She needed subtlety, a shadow operation that would bypass Stonehold's impregnable defenses. Her loyal advisors, grizzled commanders who had fought alongside her father for years, spoke of siege engines and scaling ladders, but Isabella silenced them with a wave of her hand. "We do not storm Stonehold," she declared, her voice low but firm. "We slip into it like the very mist, and we take what is ours." She had always been known for her sharp intellect and an uncanny ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. This was her father, the man who had taught her strategy and the importance of decisive action. She would not fail him. Her first step was to gather intelligence. She dispatched her most trusted lady-in-waiting, Elara, a woman whose unassuming appearance hid a keen mind and nerves of steel. Elara, disguised as a wandering herbalist, made her way to the village nearest Stonehold. She spent weeks there, observing, listening, weaving herself into the fabric of local life. She learned about the changing of the guards, the delivery routes, the personalities of the castle's key figures. Most crucially, she discovered a small, forgotten drainage tunnel rumored to run beneath the fortress, leading to a secluded grotto by the river. It was a long shot, rumored to be unstable and disused, but it was a chance. Elara also made contact with a disgruntled castle servant, a man named Thomas, who felt loyalty to the old king and was desperate to see him free. Thomas, for a promise of royal favor and land, agreed to be their inside man. Royal Chronicles of Gallia, Volume 6, Chapter 2. The plan began to form in Isabella's mind, intricate as a spider's web. It would involve a diversion, a stealth infiltration through the tunnel, and a precisely timed exfiltration. She decided to use a small hand-picked team. Sir Gareth, a knight renowned for his silent movements and skill with a dagger. 2 archers, Elara, who was also proficient with a bow, and her Yelf. Yes, Isabella insisted on going. "My father knows my voice, my touch," she argued. "His spirit is fragile. He will need reassurance, and I will not send others to do what I can do myself." Her council protested, but her resolve was unyielding. This was a personal mission. Weeks passed in meticulous preparation. Gareth trained Finn in silent movement. Elara mapped out the interior of Stonehold from Thomas's descriptions, creating crude but accurate floor plans. Isabella, meanwhile, personally selected the equipment: dark, silent clothing, ropes, grappling hooks, and a special sedative disguised as a powerful sleeping draught for any unforeseen obstacles. They even practiced navigating a mock-up of the drainage tunnel in the palace cellars, ensuring they could move quickly and quietly through its claustrophobic confine. They waited for the new moon, for the darkest night when the river would be high, its current strong enough to mask their approach by boat, and its sound loud enough to cover any small noises they might make. The night arrived, a heavy shroud of black velvet. Cold drizzle began to fall, turning the narrow path to Stonehold into a slick, treacherous ribbon of mud. Isabella, dressed in dark leather and cloaked, felt the familiar weight of a small dagger tucked into her boot. They approached by river, a small, flat-bottomed boat, propelled by Gareth's powerful strokes. Hidden by the reeds and the driving rain, the grotto entrance to the tunnel was barely visible. A jagged maw in the rock face choked with roots and fawn stones. It was even more perilous than anticipated. The water inside was icy cold, rising to their chests in places, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and stagnant water. They moved slowly, cautiously, Gareth leading, Isabella close behind, then Elara and Finn. Every scraping sound echoed ominously in the confined space. Chronicles of the Riverlands, Book the 4th, Chapter 12. After what felt like an eternity, but was perhaps only an hour, they emerged into a forgotten cellar beneath the castle's kitchens. The air here was warmer, carrying the faint scent of stale bread and cooking fires. Thomas, their inside man, was waiting. He had left a hidden door unlocked, a heavy wooden slab disguised as part of the wall. He led them through a maze of service passages, silent as ghosts, past sleeping servants and the occasional snoring guard. Their destination was the tower where King Louis was held. As they ascended, the sounds of the castle became clearer. The distant shouts of guards, the clatter of a pot, the faint glow of light from under doors. Each creak of their boots was a heart-stopping moment. It was heavy, reinforced, oak secured with a massive iron lock. Gareth worked swiftly, his picks dancing in the faint light of a smuggled lantern. Tumblers clicked one by one, a series of tiny victories. The lock gave way with a soft thud. Inside, King Louis lay on a crude bed, his face pale and drawn. "Hush, father," she soothed. "We are taking you home." Thomas had a change of clothes ready, simpler garb to help them blend in. They helped the old king dress, supporting his frail frame. The plan was to escort him back through the tunnel. But just as they prepared to leave, a heavy clanging sound echoed from the corridor outside, followed by shouts. A guard patrol making their rounds had grown suspicious of a flicker of light from the king's window. "We are compromised," Gareth hissed, drawing his dagger. Finn, Elara, to the roof. The new plan formed instantly in Isabella's mind. Tunnel was too slow, too dangerous. With an alerted guard, they had to go up. They hurried to the tower stairs, Isabella and Gareth supporting the king, Elara and Finn taking the lead. The clatter of armored boots grew louder from below. They burst onto the cold, rain-slicked battlements. The wind whipping at their cloaks below, the courtyard swarmed with torches and armed men. "Too many," Elara breathed, drawing her bow. "The old guard tower." Isabella pointed to a smaller, disused tower, connected by a crumbling section of wall leading to the cliff edge. "Thomas, you must create a diversion, draw them away from us." Thomas, pale but determined, nodded. He raced in the opposite direction, shouting deliberately, drawing attention to himself, leading the guards on a wild goose chase. Personal testimony of Sir Gareth, etc. 1360. As Thomas drew the main force, Isabella, Gareth, Elara, Finn, and the king hurried across the perilous crumbling wall. The old guard tower had a small, forgotten postern gate leading to a precarious path down the cliff face, one known only to the most experienced mountaineers. It was a desperate gamble. Gareth went first, testing the handholds, then helped lower the king tied securely with rope down the steep incline. Isabella followed, her hands raw from gripping a wet rock. Elara and Finn provided cover fire from the tower, peppering the approaching guards with arrows, slowing their advance just enough. The descent was agonizingly slow and dangerous. Loose stones tumbled into the abyss below. The king, despite his weakness, showed remarkable fortitude, gritting his teeth against the pain. Finally, they reached the base of the cliff, where their small boat waited. Still hidden by the driving rain and the overhanging trees, they quickly loaded the king aboard. As Gareth pushed off, the first of Baron Armand's men appeared at the top of the cliff, their torches casting long, menacing shadows. A volley of arrows rained down, splashing into the water around them. One grazed Elara's arm, but she barely flinched. Finn returned fire, his arrows finding their mark in the flickering light. They rowed with desperate speed, the king bundled under cloaks, the river current aiding their escape. The sounds of the castle faded behind them, replaced by the roar of the river and the beating of their own hearts. By dawn, they were far downstream, safe within royal territory. King Louis was weak, but alive. Isabella had orchestrated a rescue that seemed impossible, risking everything to save her father from the clutches of a usurper. The kingdom breathed a collective sigh of relief, marveling at their queen's daring and devotion. Number 6. The Unraveling of the Iron Serpent. The year was 1288. Queen Mathilde of Ethelgard stood before the war council, her usually calm demeanor replaced by an almost terrifying intensity. Her loyal chancellor, Lord Alaric, a man whose wisdom had guided the kingdom through countless crises, had been seized. He had been captured during a diplomatic mission to the volatile borderlands, ambushed by the forces of Duke Reynard of the Blackwood March, a ruthless rival claimant to the throne. Reynard held Alaric in his fortress of Serpent's Tooth, a grim stronghold nestled deep within the treacherous Blackwood forest, known for its labyrinthine dungeons and fanatical guards. Alaric possessed vital documents, treaties that could solidify Mathilde's claim to the throne and expose Reynard's treasonous dealings with foreign powers. His capture was not just a personal blow, but a strategic catastrophe. The Duke's terms were clear: Alaric's life for the immediate abdication of Queen Mathilde, a brutal ultimatum designed to cripple her reign and demoralize her supporters. Mathilde knew abdication was not an option. It would plunge Ethelgard into chaos and civil war. Sending an army was equally futile. Serpent's Tooth was a natural fortress, surrounded by dense, impassable woods, known for their treacherous bogs and hidden pitfalls. Any approach would be signaled miles in advance, and Alaric would surely be executed long before a siege could be mounted. She needed to retrieve him and the documents without bloodshed and without Reynard realizing her true objective until it was too late. Mathilde was renowned for her meticulous planning and her ability to weave complex schemes. She saw the fortress as a puzzle one she intended to solve. Royal Archives of Ethelgard, Parchment 2, 1 bit. Her first move was to appear to negotiate. She sent an envoy to Duke Reynard, expressing her sorrow at Alaric's capture and feigning distress over his demands. This was a ploy to buy time, to make Reynard complacent, believing he had her cornered. While the envoy played out this diplomatic charade, Mathilde began to assemble her true instruments of rescue. She summoned Master Elara, a former spy and master of disguise, who now served in her personal retinue, and Sir Cale, a knight known for his strength, stealth, and unwavering loyalty. Lord Alaric is more than a chancellor, Mathilde stated, her eyes fixed on them. He is the memory of this kingdom and my trusted friend. He must be brought home. Alara's mission was reconnaissance. Disguised as a wandering minstrel, she ventured into the Blackwood forest, using her musical talents to gain entry to the small villages surrounding Serpent's Tooth. She observed the fortress from afar, sketching its outer defenses, noting the patrols. She learned of a yearly festival held just outside the castle walls, a time of feasting and revelry when the Duke's guards were often lax and distracted. She also discovered a network of old mining tunnels beneath the fortress, long abandoned, but rumored to connect to the castle's deepest dungeons. These tunnels were dangerous, unstable, and filled with old collapses, but they offered a potential secret pathway. Elara even managed to bribe a few disgruntled stable hands and kitchen staff within the castle, securing their promise of assistance during the festival. Chronicles of the Blackwood, March 1290. The plan Mathilde devised was audacious. During the festival, while the main castle guards were occupied with the festivities, a small team would enter the abandoned tunnels. Elara, guiding them through the dark passages, would use her knowledge of the castle layout to navigate to the dungeons where Alaric was held. Sir Kale would lead the physical extraction. Mathilde, however, added a crucial layer, a diversion on the night of the festival, that would draw away the Duke's most elite guards, leaving the castle core lightly defended. This diversion would be a feigned attack on a distant supply convoy, designed to look like a small-scale raid by rival bandits, enough to cause alarm, but not a full-scale military response. She would orchestrate this from a distance, using a loyal but expendable detachment of cavalry. Preparation for the actual rescue was painstaking. Elara drew detailed maps of the tunnels based on her intelligence, marking collapsed sections and unstable areas. Kale trained his hand-picked team of 5 trusted soldiers in silent movement, grappling, and subterranean navigation. They practiced moving through constricted spaces, using only the faintest glow of lanterns, relying on touch and memory. Mathilde personally oversaw the crafting of specialized tools, silent lockpicking instruments, compact grappling hooks, and a non-lethal sleeping draught disguised as a potent wine intended for any guards they might encounter. She insisted on the non-lethal approach. Bloodshed would only escalate the conflict and put Alaric in greater danger. The night of the festival arrived, a carnival of lights and laughter. Outside the formidable walls of Serpent's Tooth, the air hummed with music and the smell of roasting meats. Inside, the Duke's guards were indeed distracted, many having indulged in too much ale. As planned, a small raiding party, commanded by a loyal captain, staged a hit-and-run attack on a supply convoy miles away, drawing away a significant portion of Duke Renard's elite cavalry. Under the cover of darkness and the festival's revelry, Elara, Sir Kale, and his team slipped into the entrance of the abandoned mining tunnels. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of earth and decay. The tunnels were narrower and more treacherous than anticipated. Collapsed sections forced them to crawl on their bellies through passages barely wide enough for a man. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small, icy pools. Rats scurried in the darkness. Elara, with a small glowing stone, navigated through the labyrinth, her memory of the maps proving invaluable. Kale moved with grim determination, his soldiers silently following. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the connecting passage to the castle dungeons. It was an old, rusted grate, hidden behind a loose stone wall. Kale used a pry bar to carefully remove the stones, then sawed through the rusted bars with a specialized tool, the soft grinding sound masked by the distant festival noise. They emerged into a narrow, damp corridor. The light here was faint, flickering from a single torch further down the passage. 2 guards sat slumped against a wall, their snores echoing softly. Elara had arranged for the castle servant they bribed to leave them a special potent wine. It was queer. The guards had partaken liberally of the wine. Royal Archives of Aethelgard, Parchment 22a. They found Lord Alaric in the deepest cell, his face gaunt, but his eyes still held a spark of his old fire when he saw Elara and Kale. He was weak but coherent. "The documents," he rasped. "In my boot, false bottom." Kale quickly retrieved the small rolled parchments. They helped Alaric to his feet, supporting his weakened frame. Just as they prepared to exit, a heavy clang echoed from above. A change of guard. Earlier than expected footsteps approached. "We must find another way," Elara whispered urgently. She remembered a small, rarely used service stairwell leading up to the castle's neglected western tower. It was a long shot known to be unstable. Kale nodded. There was no time for deliberation. They moved swiftly, silent as shadows guiding the frail Alaric. They passed by the new guards hidden in the deeper recesses of the dungeon, holding their breath as the patrol moved past. They ascended the narrow, winding stairwell, the air growing colder as they reached the upper levels. The western tower was indeed abandoned, its windows boarded up, its battlements crumbling. But Elara knew of a weak point in the outer wall, a section that with enough force could be breached. She pointed to a section of old cracked masonry. Cale, with the combined might of his soldiers, began to work. They hammered and pried at the stones, the sound surprisingly muffled by the thick stone walls and the continuing festival revelry below. Finally, with a soft groan of protest, a section of the wall gave way, revealing a gap just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Outside, the night air was biting, and the ground below looked a terrifying distance away, but fortune favored them. A small, forgotten outer scaffolding used for repairs years ago and left partially in place provided a perilous path down the sheer rock face. It was brickety and threatened to collapse with every step, but it was their only way. Cale went first, securing ropes. Then carefully, Lord Alaric was lowered. Then Elara and the rest of the team. The descent was harrowing, the wooden planks groaning under their weight. They were exposed, visible to anyone who might look up from the courtyard below, but the festival lights and the Duke's complacency acted as their unwitting shield. They reached the ground, bruised and shaken, but unharmed. A small group of Matilda's loyal cavalry, disguised as traveling merchants, waited hidden in a copse of trees at the edge of the Blackwood Forest. They had been dispatched as a backup, a final fail-safe for the escape. They whisked Lord Alaric away deep into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. The documents were safe. Lord Alaric was safe. Mathilde's complex plan, a masterpiece of stealth and diversion, had succeeded. The unraveling of the Iron Serpent was complete. Number 5. The rescue of the falsely accused. The year was 1195. The air in the grand hall of the Lion's Tooth Citadel crackled with tension thick as a winter fog. Sir Cedric of Whitehaven, one of Queen Blanche of Lyra's most trusted and beloved knights, stood accused of treason. The charges were damning: conspiracy with a rival kingdom, accepting bribes and plotting against the crown. The evidence, though seemingly overwhelming, was flimsy, a carefully constructed web of forged letters and coerced testimonies woven by Duke Valerius, a powerful noble who coveted Cedric's lands and influence. The trial had been swift, brutal, and utterly unjust. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty, the sentence execution by dawn. Queen Blanche knew with every fiber of her being that Cedric was innocent. She had known him since childhood. His loyalty was unshakable, his honor beyond reproach. Duke Valerius was cunning and ruthless, but Blanche was renowned for her sharp intellect and an unwavering sense of justice. She would not allow an innocent man to die, especially one so vital to the kingdom's stability. The law, as it stood, offered no recourse. The king, influenced by Valerius's persuasive lies and desperate for peace with the rival kingdom, had signed the execution order. To openly defy it would be an act of rebellion, potentially sparking civil war. She had to act outside the law to orchestrate a rescue so subtle, so undeniable in its precision, that even Valerius would be left speechless. Royal Ordinances of Lyra, Volume 2, Chapter 5. Plan began with a series of quiet, almost imperceptible movements. She summoned her most trusted lady-in-waiting, Lady Isolde, a woman known for her keen observation, skills, and her ability to move unseen through the castle's shadows. Isolde's mission was to gather intelligence on Cedric's prison, the Black Bastion, a grim, isolated tower within the citadel's outer walls. It was heavily guarded, its single entrance a massive iron gate, its windows mere slits high up on the wall. Isolde, feigning illness and requesting a quiet chamber, with a view positioned herself to observe the changing of the guards, the delivery of meals, the routines of the tower's commander. She discovered a small, disused sewage pipe leading from the lowest level of the bastion into a forgotten alcove just beyond the outer wall, used only for cleaning and known only to a few long-serving custodians. It was a perilous, disgusting route, but it was a path. Blanche also quietly reached out to a small, loyal faction of knights who had served with Cedric, men who, like her, believed in his innocence but dared not speak out openly against the king's decree. Among them was Sir Ronan, a quiet, skilled warrior known for his agility and mastery of silent movement. Ronan and his two most trusted squires, Thomas and Elara, would be the backbone of the extraction team. Blanche emphasized the need for absolute secrecy and minimal violence. Cedric's rescue could not be seen as an assault on royal authority, but rather a clandestine operation of truth. The Queen's next step was to create a diversion. She decided upon a meticulously planned fabricated fire in a distant wing of the citadel on the night of the execution. Not a destructive blaze, but enough to draw the attention of the main guard force, the fire wardens, and most of the castle's staff. This would reduce the number of guards immediately surrounding the Black Bastion and create a window of opportunity. Simultaneously, Blanche instructed her court physician to administer a powerful sleeping draught, disguised as a calming cordial, to the Bastion's commander and his immediate lieutenants during their evening meal. The effect would be gradual, allowing them to remain on duty for a few hours before succumbing to a deep, prolonged sleep, ensuring no immediate alarm. As the hours dwindled before dawn, Blanche meticulously reviewed every detail. Ronan and his team would approach the Black Bastion from the riverside under the cover of darkness. They would use the old sewage pipe, navigating through the confined, foul-smelling passage. Isolde, disguised as a servant, would be positioned near the pipe's exit, ready to provide a small hidden lantern and a change of clothes. For Cedric, inside, the poisoned wine would be taking its effect, the guards growing drowsy, their vigilance dulled. Ronan, with his specialized tools, would attempt to pick the lock to Cedric's cell. The night air was cold and still. Around midnight, the carefully orchestrated fire began. A plume of smoke rose from the eastern wing, followed by the cries of fire and the frantic ringing of the alarm bell. Torches flickered, and men rushed towards the emergency, leaving the central courtyard surprisingly quiet. The distraction was perfect. Ronan and his team moved with silent precision. They reached the river, their dark clothing blending into the shadows. The entrance to the sewage pipe was overgrown and difficult to find, but Isolde had provided precise directions. The stench inside was overwhelming, but they pushed through, crawling on their hands and knees, through the dark, narrow tunnel, the sound of the citadel's distant chaos echoing faintly. They emerged into the forgotten alcove outside the Black Bastion, spluttering but determined. Isolde was there, a lantern glowing softly under her cloak. Inside the bastion, the sleeping draft had done its work. The tower commander snored loudly at his desk. The few remaining guards were slumped in their chairs, their heads nodding, their eyes heavy-lidded. The corridor was eerily quiet. Ronan, a master of stealth, moved like a ghost. He reached Cedric's cell, its iron door a formidable barrier. With his lock-picking tools, he worked with intense concentration. The only sounds, the soft clicks of the tumblers and his own hushed breaths. It seemed to take an eternity, but finally, with a soft thunk, the heavy bolt slid back. Cedric, gaunt and pale, looked up in disbelief as the door swung open. "Ronan," he whispered, his voice raspy. "The Queen sent me," Ronan replied. "We have little time." They quickly helped Cedric into the clean, simple clothes Isolde had brought. As they prepared to exit, a faint sound echoed from above. The jingle of keys, approaching footsteps, a new guard, an unexpected patrol was making his rounds. "We must hide," Isolde whispered, pulling them into a dark, shadowed alcove behind a stack of crates. The guard passed by, humming softly to himself, completely unaware of the tense scene unfolding mere feet from him. It was a heart-stopping moment, a whisper of fate. Once the guard had passed and his footsteps faded, they moved again quickly and silently back towards the sewage pipe. The return journey through the pipe was as miserable as the entry, but they pushed through, driven by the urgency of the moment. They emerged on the riverbank, gasping for fresh air, soaked and covered in filth, but free. Isolde led them to a small hidden boat she had prepared, nestled among the reeds. Ronan and his squires quickly rowed away, disappearing downriver into the pre-dawn mist. By the time the sun began to paint the eastern sky and the alarm was finally raised at the Black Bastion, Sir Cedric was far away, hidden in a network of loyal safe houses arranged by Queen Blanche. Duke Valerius was furious, his carefully constructed lie exposed by an invisible hand. But there was no evidence of foul play, no trace of how Cedric had vanished from an impregnable tower. Queen Blanche, composed and serene, merely expressed her sorrow at the mysterious disappearance, maintaining her unwavering loyalty to the king while secretly celebrating the triumph of justice. The rescue of the falsely accused was a testament to her intelligence and unwavering dedication. Number 4. The Flight of the Royal Heir. The year was 1401. A chilling wind swept through the halls of Castle Avalon, carrying with it not just the scent of winter, but the palpable tension of a kingdom on the brink. Queen Margaret of Viridian, a monarch celebrated for her steadfastness, found herself facing the darkest hour of her reign. Her infant son, Prince Arthur, the sole heir to the throne, was the target of a swift and brutal coup. Duke Mordred, a distant cousin with a festering ambition, had launched a surprise attack on the palace in the dead of night, his forces moving like shadows, overwhelming the unprepared royal guard. The sounds of battle, steel, clashing shouts, the splintering of wood echoed ominously through the ancient stone wall. Margaret's primary concern was not her own safety, but the precious life of her son. His capture would mean the end of the royal line, the kingdom plunging into chaos and Mordred's tyrannical grasp. Margaret, known for her courage and her ability to act decisively under pressure, knew she had only moments. The main palace guard was being overwhelmed. The royal nurseries were in the heavily assaulted West Wing. She had to get Arthur out, away from the bloodshed in the Duke's reach. There was no time for elaborate plans. This would be a desperate, improvised flight. Her only allies were her unwavering resolve, a handful of loyal ladies-in-waiting, and one grizzled loyal guard, Captain Sir Boren, who had served her family for decades. Boren, she commanded, her voice clear and steady amidst the chaos. The prince, he must escape. Chronicles of Viridian, Volume the 8th, Chapter 4. Sir Boren, his face grim, nodded. He knew the palace's hidden passages like the back of his hand. Margaret herself had a profound knowledge of the castle's architecture, having explored every nook and cranny as a child. She remembered an old, rarely used passage beneath the castle's kitchens, originally designed for servants' access during sieges, that led to a forgotten chapel beyond the outer walls. From there, a small, unmarked path wound through the dense woods to a secluded hunting lodge, known only to a few. It was a perilous journey, especially with an infant, but it was their only chance. The first challenge was reaching the nurseries. Corridors were already filling with Mordred's men, their torches casting grotesque shadows. Margaret, with Boren and two ladies-in-waiting, Lady Elara and Lady Isolde, moved like specters through the burning palace. They used service stairs, ducking into linen closets as patrols passed. The sounds of combat were terrifyingly close. They reached the nursery wing, finding it already compromised. Two of Mordred's hulking guards stood outside the nursery door, their heavy axes at the ready. "Take them," Margaret whispered to Boren, her hand already on the hilt of a small dagger she kept concealed in her gown. Boren, a master of silent combat, engaged one guard, his sword ablur. Margaret, with surprising speed, hurled a heavy bronze statue of a griffin, knocking the second guard off balance just long enough for Lady Elara to strike him with a heavy candlestick, sending him crashing to the floor. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly unroyal, but necessary. They burst into the nursery. The nurse, a young woman named Gwen, was huddled over the crib, protecting Prince Arthur with her own body. "Gwen, give him to me," Margaret ordered, her voice firm. Gwen, trembling, handed over the sleeping infant. Margaret quickly wrapped him in a thick wool blanket, bundling him tightly. "Boren, the passage to the chapel, we go now." Sir Boren led the way, his shield raised, his sword ready. They navigated the kitchens, a chaotic scene with terrified servants and a few loyal guards making a desperate stand. They slipped past, unnoticed in the pandemonium, royal archives of Viridian sealed document A9. They found the entrance to the hidden passage behind a movable pantry shelf. It was narrow, dark, and descended steeply. Boren went first, ensuring it was clear. Margaret followed, cradling Arthur tightly. Then Elara, Isolde, and Gwen. The passage was stifling, the air thick with dust, and the smell of ancient stone. Was a silent, terrifying descent into the unknown. Their only light, the faint glow of a small, smuggled lantern. They emerged into the forgotten chapel, a small, crumbling stone building hidden deep within a thicket of overgrown trees. The air here was cool and fresh, tasting of damp earth. The sounds of the palace battle were now a distant, muffled roar. To the hunting lodge, Margaret instructed. Path was barely discernible, overgrown with thorns and tangled roots. Boren cleared the way, his sword hacking through the undergrowth. Lady Elara carried a small satchel with a few provisions, a flask of water, some dried meat, and a small pouch of gold coins. Lady Isolde helped Gwen, who was still in shock. The journey through the woods was fraught with peril. The night was moonless, the forest a dark, oppressive tunnel. They stumbled over roots, slipped on wet leaves. The cold bit into them. Prince Arthur, disturbed by the sudden movement and chill, began to whimper, then to cry softly. Margaret hushed him, rocking him gently, her fear a tight knot in her stomach. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, sounded like an approaching enemy. They heard distant shouts, the baying of dogs. Mordred's men were already searching, fanning out from the palace, their desperate hunt for the heir beginning. They are close, Boren grunted, his hand on his sword hilt. He urged them to move faster, despite their exhaustion. Just as they neared the hunting lodge, a sudden burst of torchlight pierced the darkness. Troll of Mordred's cavalry, having skirted the main search, had stumbled upon their trail. Down? Boren roared, shoving them into a thicket of brambles. He drew his sword, ready to face the patrol alone to buy them time. But Margaret had a plan. Barring create a diversion, lead them away. Elara, Isolde, Gwen, follow me. We take a different path. She pointed towards a small, nearly invisible deer trail leading deeper into the densest part of the forest away from the lodge. Boren, understanding, gave a grim nod and charged towards the patrol, drawing their attention with a fierce yell. He fought with the fury of a cornered badger, single-handedly holding back several armed men, his valiant stand, buying precious minutes. Margaret, clutching Arthur, plunged into the thorny trail, the ladies in waiting close behind. The thorns tore at their cloaks and dresses, but they pushed on, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. They could hear the sounds of battle behind them. Boren's grunts, the clash of steel, the shouts of Mordred's men. They reached a small rushing stream, its icy water numbing their legs as they waded across. They knew the cold water would help mask their scent from the dogs. After what seemed like an eternity of desperate flight, they finally saw the faint outline of the hunting lodge through the trees. It was a humble, sturdy structure, easily defensible and hidden. They stumbled inside, collapsing by the cold hearth. Arthur, sensing the end of the immediate danger, finally quieted, snuggling into his mother's arms. They were safe for now. Boren miraculously appeared an hour later, wounded but alive, having fought his way free and shaken off his pursuers. He had bought them the crucial time they needed. The following days were a blur of nervous waiting. Margaret, with the loyal Boren, sent out her own secret messages, alerting other loyal nobles to Mordred's treason and her son's survival. She had saved the heir, and with him the hope of a peaceful future for Viridian. The flight of the royal heir was a testament to a queen's fierce love and an almost superhuman resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Number 3. The King's Ransom Reclaim. The year was 1076. A cloud of despair hung over the kingdom of Eldoria. King Theron, a just and beloved ruler, had been captured during a surprise attack by the marauding forces of the Northern Horde, a notoriously brutal and unpredictable tribal confederation. His captors held them in their newly established war camp, deep within the treacherous unmapped wilderness of the Whispering Peaks. The Horde's leader, the fearsome warlord Kale, demanded an impossible ransom, not just gold and jewels, but the surrender of 5 key border strongholds, effectively crippling Eldoria's defenses. Queen Philippa, a woman of deep piety and shrewd political acumen, knew this ransom was a trap, a ploy to weaken the kingdom before a full-scale invasion. But more than that, Theron was her husband, the father of her children, and she would not abandon him to a barbaric fate. Philippa was known for her calm under pressure and her ability to inspire fierce loyalty. She understood that a direct military confrontation with the Horde in their own territory was suicide. Kale's forces were too numerous, too wild, too familiar with the terrain. She needed to retrieve her husband without provoking a wider war, a daring act of stealth and subterfuge. Her plan would need to exploit the Horde's arrogance and their underestimation of a medieval queen. She needed to play by their rules, but twist them to her advantage. Eldorian Royal Scrolls, Chronicle of the Kings, Volume I. Her first step was to appear to acquiesce to Kale's demands. She dispatched a seemingly humble envoy, ostensibly to negotiate the terms of the ransom, but in reality, to gather intelligence. The envoy, a shrewd merchant named Thomas, was tasked with observing the Horde's camp, its layout, the number of guards, the king's location, and any weaknesses. Thomas returned with a harrowing account. King Theron was kept in a crude but heavily guarded cage in the center of the camp, a constant display of Kale's power. Camp was a sprawling, chaotic affair, but the immediate vicinity of the king was always swarming with elite guards. However, Thomas also noted a curious detail. The Horde, despite their fearsome reputation, were superstitious, especially about the spirits of the mountains and the omens of the sky. Philippa seized upon this. She knew the Horde revered their shamans, men who interpreted dreams and performed rituals. She would create an omen, a sign from the spirits that would demand King Theron's release. She sought out Master Alaric, a renowned illusionist and master of subtle chemicals, a man who, though not a warrior, possessed extraordinary talents. Alaric, deeply loyal to the crown, agreed to assist. Her next recruitment was Sir Gavin, a young knight known for his incredible agility and his ability to move silently through any terrain. Gavin was to be the extraction expert. The plan began to take shape, audacious and unconventional. On the night of the full moon, Alaric would create a diversion, a heavenly omen designed to terrify the superstitious Horde. This would be a specially prepared incendiary device, launched by a powerful catapult from a hidden position far outside the camp, designed to explode high above the camp in a spectacular, silent shower of colored light and smoke, resembling a falling star or a celestial raft. While the Horde was distracted by this terrifying spectacle, Gavin and his small hand-picked team of scouts, disguised as humble mountain folk, would infiltrate the camp. Their objective, the king, preparation. Alaric meticulously crafted his chemical mixtures, testing them in secret, ensuring the effect would be both stunning and harmless. Gavin and his scouts trained for weeks, learning to move silently through the rocky, uneven terrain, practicing stealth and evasion. They even fashioned special footwear from hardened leather and moss to minimize sound. Philippa, meanwhile, used the official negotiations to her advantage. She sent messages promising large shipments of ale and roasted meats to the Horde camp as part of the ransom payment, a generous gesture designed to further lull them into complacency and encourage widespread celebration. On the night of the planned omen, the full moon rose, a pale orb in the cold. The Horde camp was a cacophony of sound, filled with the raucous celebration brought on by the promised ale. Drunken shouts and raucous laughter echoed through the mountains. Philippa and Alaric were positioned high on a remote ridge, their hidden catapult carefully aimed. Below, Gavin and his 3 scouts, clad in simple dark tunics, moved like shadows towards the perimeter of the camp. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat and cheap ale. At the prearranged signal, Alaric launched his device. High above the horde camp, it detonated with a soft whoosh, not a bang, blossoming into an ethereal shower of brilliant blue and green light, trailing shimmering sparks, as if a star were indeed falling. Collective gasp rose from the camp, followed by terrified whispers. The music died, the laughter ceased. Many of the horde warriors, superstitious to their core, dropped to their knees, believing it to be a wrathful sign from their mountain gods. Camp was plunged into stunned silence and growing panic. Shamans began to wail, chanting prayers to ward off the evil omen. Cale's Lament. A Chronicle of Defeat, 1078. In the ensuing chaos and terror, Gavin and his team struck. The outer guards, distracted and fearful, barely noticed them. They slipped past, moving quickly towards the center of the camp where King Theron was held. King's immediate guards, though elite, were also caught in the grip of superstition, their eyes fixed on the sky, their weapons momentarily forgot. Gavin, with his uncanny agility, scaled the crude wooden cage, holding King Theron. With a swift, silent motion, he sawed through the heavy wooden bars with a specialized tool. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "the Queen sent us. We must move quickly." Theron, though weakened by his ordeal, was still a man of strength. He nodded grimly as Gavin helped him descend. A lone, sober guard, less affected by the omen, turned his head, his eyes widening. He drew a horn to sound the alarm, but before he could raise it to his lips, one of Gavin's scouts, with remarkable precision, threw a heavy pouch of sand, striking the guard in the face, stunning him. They darted away, blending into the shadows of the panicked camp. Their escape route was through the chaotic camp, past the terrified horde warriors, and out into the dark wilderness. They encountered several small groups of guards, but each time they were able to slip past using the confusion of the omen and the drunken state of the horde as cover. The shamans were now in a frenzy, shouting about the unleashed spirit that demanded the king's release. The horde, utterly convinced that the king was somehow cursed, began to disperse, fleeing the camp in terror. This was an unexpected bonus, a complete unraveling of Cale's control. They reached a designated rendezvous point, a small hidden cave known to Gavin. Queen Philippa, who had ridden hard after launching the omen, was there with a small escort of loyal knights. Seeing Theron alive and relatively unharmed, her heart swelled with relief. They embraced a moment of profound joy amidst the cold wilderness. By dawn, the horde camp was largely abandoned, their forces scattered, terrified by the omen. Cale, left with only a few of his most loyal but equally superstitious warriors, was left bewildered and disgraced. Philippa had not only reclaimed her king without bloodshed or battle, but had also shattered the morale of her enemies. The king's ransom reclaimed was a master class in strategic deception and brave action, orchestrated by a queen who understood that true power lay not just in swords, but in intelligence. Number 2. The Serpent's Kiss. The year was 1320. Empress Matilda of Ethelgard found herself embroiled in the brutal, never-ending conflict known as the War of the Succession. Her claim to the throne was constantly challenged by her ruthless cousin, Duke Lothar, who commanded a formidable army and controlled vast swaths of the kingdom. The war had reached a stalemate, but a crucial turning point arrived with devastating news. Sir Roland, her most loyal and brilliant military tactician, had been captured. Roland was not just a general. He was the strategic mind behind every one of Matilda's victories. He was being held in Raven's Peak, Lothar's ancestral fortress, a towering, forbidding stronghold built on a sheer cliff face, notorious for its iron defenses and its commandant, a sadistic brute known as the Butcher. Roland's capture meant certain defeat for Matilda's cause. Lothar's demands were simple: Roland's head or Matilda's surrender. Matilda, known for her iron will and sharp strategic mind, refused to let Roland fall. She knew Lothar would interrogate him relentlessly, hoping to extract her battle plans and weaknesses. A direct assault on Raven's Peak was impossible. Its defenses were designed to withstand a prolonged siege, and its isolated location made any surprise attack improbable. She needed to retrieve Roland, and more importantly, prevent him from divulging critical information, without sacrificing her forces or her position. Her plan would need to be swift, surgical, and utterly secret, relying on the unseen hands of a few loyal operatives. Annals of the War of Succession, Volume the 3rd, Chapter 1. Her first move was to assess the true situation within Raven's Peak. She dispatched a network of her most skilled spies, disguised as merchants and traveling peddlers, to the villages surrounding the fortress. Their mission: gather every scrap of information about the fortress's layout, its guard rotations, the personality of the butcher, and most crucially, the exact location of Roland's cell. They discovered that Roland was held in the deepest, most secure dungeon, known as the Serpent's Pit, a damp, cold cell carved into the very rock of the mountain, accessible only by a single heavily guarded passage. They also learned of a small disused well shaft that descended from the outer courtyard directly into a forgotten catacomb beneath the dungeon level, a passage deemed too dangerous and unstable to be used. Matilda decided to use this forgotten well shaft as her entry point. She summoned two of her most trusted and capable agents, Lyra, a master of poisons and elixirs, renowned for her ability to move unseen, and Sir Kale, a silent, powerful knight, expert in infiltration and close quarters combat. Roland's mind holds the future of Aethelgard, Matilda told them, her voice calm but determined. You must bring him back and ensure Lothar learns nothing. The plan was daring. Lyra, disguised as a camp follower, would infiltrate the outer defenses of Raven's Peak, then use her knowledge of poisons to incapacitate the outer perimeter guards with a specially concocted sleeping agent administered through their meager rations. Once the immediate perimeter was compromised, Kale would lead a small hand-picked team through the abandoned well shaft. They would navigate the dark catacombs, break into the Serpent's Pit, extract Roland, and then use the confusion caused by Lyra's next phase of chemical distractions to escape. Lyra's final act would be to create a powerful non-lethal sedative that would render Roland unconscious, ensuring he could not be forced to reveal anything under duress during their escape. Nor would he be a burden during the perilous journey. Raven's Peak, A History by Master Elara, 1330. Weeks were spent in meticulous preparation. Lyra prepared her concoctions, testing their potency and speed. Kale trained his team in rope climbing, silent movement, and confined space navigation. They practiced moving through darkness, relying on touch and whispered commands. Tilda, meanwhile, orchestrated a series of small diversionary skirmishes along other parts of the border designed to keep Lothar's main forces occupied and prevent him from focusing too much attention on Raven's Peak. She sent messages to Roland, hidden in coded provisions, assuring him that rescue was coming, bolstering his spirits against the harsh interrogations he was undoubtedly facing. The night of the rescue arrived, a dark, stormy affair, the wind howling through the peaks. Lyra, disguised as a ragged food vendor, managed to deliver her special stew, laced with a sleeping agent, to the outer guard posts of Raven's Peak. Within hours, the guards began to grow drowsy, their posts left unattended. As they succumbed to a deep sleep, Kale and his team moved in. They located the entrance to the old well shaft, hidden by overgrown bushes and rubble. The descent was terrifying, a sheer drop into cold, echoing darkness. They used grappling hooks and ropes, rappelling down the slippery, moss-covered stone walls. The air grew damp and cold. As they descended, the faint sounds of the storm above replaced by the drip of water. They reached the bottom, a narrow, cramped passage leading to the ancient catacombs. The catacombs were a maze of forgotten tunnels and crumbling crypts filled with the dust of centuries. Cale navigated expertly. Guided by the crude maps provided by Matilda's spies, they finally reached the section beneath the Serpent's Pit. The rock here was thicker, reinforced. Cale and his team used specialized tools to silently chip away at the stone, creating a breach large enough to pass through. It was slow back-breaking work, each strike carefully. Muffled to avoid alerting the guards, above they emerged into the Serpent's Pit, a small, dark chamber. Roland was there shackled to a wall, his face bruised and weary, but his eyes still defiant. 2 guards stood watch outside his cell. Lyra, who had followed Cale's team down the well, now had her next phase of the plan ready. She released a specially prepared smoke bomb, a non-toxic but potent irritant designed to cause coughing and disorientation. The smoke billowed through the dungeon, causing the guards to choke and cough, their eyes watering. In the confusion, Cale swiftly incapacitated them. Tying them securely and silently, Lyra then moved to Roland. "This will help you," she whispered, administering a potent sedative into his arm with a small, concealed needle. Roland's eyes fluttered, then closed. He slumped into unconsciousness. Cale quickly freed him from his shackles. Now came the escape. The most direct route back up the well shaft was too slow with an unconscious man. Cale, using the precise information from the spies, knew of a rarely used supply tunnel that led from the lower dungeons to a hidden exit outside the main fortress walls. Intended for a merchant, but less exposed, they carried Roland between them, a silent, grim procession through the smoke-filled dungeon. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages, they heard distant shouts. The butcher, realizing the outer guards were unaccounted for, had sounded a general alarm. The fortress was awakening. They moved faster, the sound of their own pounding hearts echoing in their ears. They reached the emergency supply tunnel's exit, a heavy bolted wooden door hidden by dense ivy. Cale worked quickly with his tools. The bolt slid back with a grating sigh. They emerged into the stormy night, rain lashing down. Just as they did, a group of Lothar's elite guards, alerted by the butcher, burst from a nearby gate, their torches piercing the darkness. "There!" one shouted, pointing. Cale and his team returned fire with a volley of arrows slowing their pursuit. They had arranged for a small fast carriage hidden in the tree line beyond the fortress to be their getaway. They reached it just as the first of Lothar's men closed in. They bundled the unconscious Roland inside. Carriage sped away, disappearing into the dark, storm-swept wilderness, leaving the enraged Duke Lothar and the butcher screaming into the night. Roland was safe. His invaluable knowledge was safe. Empress Matilda had performed a rescue that defied the very walls of Raven's Peak, a testament to her genius and the daring of her loyal agents. The Serpent's Kiss had been delivered, and it was Lothar who was poisoned with defeat. Number 1. The Lioness and the Siege. The year was 1137. The city of Eldoria, a vital bastion of the kingdom, was under siege. Duke Valerius, a ruthless pretender to the throne, had surrounded the city with a vast army, cutting off all supplies. Inside the city walls, the situation was dire. Famine loomed, and the morale of the defenders, led by Sir Gideon, the Queen's most trusted general, was faltering. Gideon, himself a man whose courage was legendary, was close to breaking point, overwhelmed by the impossible odds. His capture or the city's fall would spell the end of Queen Isabella of Astoria's reign, her last major stronghold lost. Isabella, known as the Lioness for her fierce determination and unwavering resolve, knew that a direct military confrontation was not feasible. Her main army was too far away, engaged in another conflict. She needed to break the siege, not by force, but by ingenuity, and rescue Gideon's spirit from the brink of despair. Royal Chronicles of Astoria, Volume the 4th, Chapter 7. Isabella's plan was audacious, relying on a deeply human element, hope. She aimed not just to deliver supplies, but to send a clear, undeniable message of royal support. directly to General Gideon and to the starving populace. This would be a psychological rescue as much as a physical one. She decided on a three-pronged approach: a massive coordinated airdrop of supplies, a stealthy infiltration by her most trusted agent, and a dramatic symbolic gesture to break the siege's iron grip. Her first act was to assemble the means for the airdrop. She gathered all available large kites and gliders, traditionally used for festive displays, and tasked her royal engineers with modifying them. They would be reinforced, capable of carrying small but vital bundles of food and medical supplies. This would require perfect wind conditions and precise launching. She also recruited her most daring and agile scouts, men known for their ability to navigate treacherous terrain and evade detection. For the stealth infiltration, Isabella called upon Lady Kaelin, her personal shadow agent, a woman whose true identity was known only to the Queen. Kaelin was a master of disguise and infiltration, capable of moving through enemy lines unnoticed. Her mission was to reach General Gideon, deliver the Queen's personal message of unwavering support, and provide him with vital intelligence about Valerius's camp that Isabella had gathered through her own spy network. This message, more than food, was the true rescue for Gideon's spirit. The symbolic gesture was the most daring. Isabella would launch a single, specially crafted message kite, adorned with the royal crest, carrying a personal letter to Gideon promising immediate relief and a counterattack. This kite would be large, visible to both the besieged city and Valerius's forces, a beacon of hope and a declaration of intent. It would be launched from a hidden position deep within the forests surrounding the siege lines. Preparation for this multifaceted operation was meticulous. Engineers worked tirelessly, strengthening the kites, and gliders designing release mechanisms for the supply bundles. Scouts practiced launching in various wind conditions. Lady Kaelin studied maps of Valerius's encampment, memorizing every patrol route, every watchtower. Isabella, meanwhile, dispatched her scattered forces in minor skirmishes far from Eldoria, creating diversions and drawing Valerius's attention elsewhere, making him complacent about a direct threat to his siege. She waited for the perfect weather. A strong, steady wind blowing directly towards Eldoria from the west. The night arrived. A strong, steady westerly wind picked up rustling through the leaves of the ancient forest. Isabella, along with her engineers and scouts, was hidden deep within the woods, far from Valerius's watch. On the eastern side of the forest, Lady Kaelin, disguised as a peasant woman seeking refuge, slipped past the outer pickets of Valerius's camp. She moved like a ghost through the enemy lines, her unassuming appearance her greatest shield. She found a loose section of the city wall, known only to a few, and climbed over, using a hidden handhold, disappearing into the besieged city. Inside Eldoria, General Gideon paced his command tent, despair etched on his face. The last of the meager provisions were almost gone. Surrender seemed inevitable, but then a quiet knock at his tent door. It was Lady Kaelin, her peasant disguise shed, revealing her true identity. "My general," she whispered, "the Queen sent me. She sends her greetings and her unbreakable promise." She handed him a small, rolled parchment, a personal message from Isabella filled with words of encouragement and a detailed sketch of Valerius's weak points. Gideon, reading the Queen's firm hand, felt a surge of hope, a spark rekindled in his weary soul. The Journals of General Gideon Eldoria, 1137. Just as Gideon absorbed this intelligence, a new spectacle unfolded in the dawn sky. From the western forest, a fleet of giant kites and gliders launched by Isabella's engineers rose into the air. They soared silently on the strong winds, barely visible against the pre-dawn sky. As they passed directly over Valerius's bewildered camp, small bundles detached from their undersides, raining down food, medical supplies, and even small morale-boosting notes from the Queen fluttering into the starving city. The sight caused a ripple of stunned silence in Valerius's camp. Then confusion. But the true dramatic statement came moments later. A single, magnificent kite, adorned with the gilded royal crest of Astoria, larger than any other, soared directly over Valerius's command tent. From its tail, a long, flowing banner unrolled, clearly visible to everyone. Eldorius stands. The Queen returns. It was Isabella's personal message, a bold declaration of defiance. Valerius's soldiers, confused by the raining supplies and the defiant banner, looked up in disbelief. The morale of the besieging army, already stretched thin by weeks of inaction, began to waver. Inside the city, the sight was nothing short of miraculous. The starving citizens wept with joy as bundles of food rained down. General Gideon, standing on the battlements, watched the royal kite, a fierce grin spreading across his face. He knew then that the Queen was not only aware of their plight, but was actively, powerfully coming to their aid. The supplies were vital. But the morale boost, the renewed hope was immeasurable. Valerius, enraged by this blatant display of defiance and the dwindling morale of his own troops, quickly lost his advantage. His generals recorded widespread disquiet and fear among their men. Whispers of the Queen's magic and her unbreakable will, the very thought of a sustained siege against a city now brimming with renewed hope, supplied by the very sky, was too much. The siege, his great triumph, was beginning to crumble from within. Within days, Valerius's army, demoralized and fractured, began to pull back their commander's confidence, shattered by the Queen's audacious display. The siege was broken not by sword and shield, but by courage, ingenuity, and a spectacular act of will. Queen Isabella, the lioness, had not only saved Eldoria, but had rescued her general and her people from the depths of despair. The city was safe. The lioness had roared,